Becky here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to talk about 5 food preservation mistakes that you should avoid, talking mostly about dehydrated or freeze-dried if you do that, and canned foods, pressure canned or water bath canned. So the first one I wrote down was about making sure that when you're vacuum sealing any of your dehydrated goods, because those are going to be warmer when they come out of the dehydrator, that you make sure they are fully cooled before you vacuum seal them into jars or anything else. So even if it's mylar or plastic you're vacuum sealing in, you want to make sure they are fully cooled down to room temperature. And because if you don't do that, it can cause sweating inside whatever container you're putting it in, which can then cause spoilage, mold, and so on. Besides, there's certain things it's going to be a lot easier to tell if they're fully dry once they've cooled down to room temperature. Because a lot of things like your fruit, like I've got some dehydrated kiwi slices here, when they are still warm, they're going to be very flexible naturally. But once they've cooled, you can tell better if they're fully dried. Same thing with any of your dehydrated meats, mushrooms, anything like that. The next thing is, and it's probably not what you think I'm going to say when it comes to storing your canned goods with the bands on them. Yes, you can do that. However, one of the biggest mistakes people make is they leave the bands on their jars. Now notice that you can hear this rattling. So when you're done pressure canning, water bath canning your goods, you need to make sure that once you've made sure everything is sealed and everything is cooled down, that you wash all parts. You wash the jar, you wash the lid, you wash the band. You do not have to put the bands back on. It's going to depend on how you plan on storing them. But yes, you can set that band on there very loosely like that. For one, it might give you a place where you can store your bands, but for me, what this does is it causes a little buffer for the things I do want to stack on top of the jar, so not all the weight is going directly onto the lid, but rather onto the band, which the weight of that is going onto the rim of the jar itself. Yes, you can stack jars contrary to the old wives' tale. In fact, you can even go to the National Institute of Home Food Preservation. I hope I'm saying all the right words there. And you can look it up for yourself that it is just simply recommended you don't stack them more than 3 high. Like that. That's good enough. But even still, when I'm having to stack my jars in my pantry, I still have some kind of other layer on top. So that might be a real thin board or a chunk of cardboard that goes across the bottom row of jars, and then the other jars stack on top. So that's why you'll see some of these canned goods, like the beans, the carrots, and the peaches, they all have bands on them because these were sitting on underneath other jars. Whereas this jar right here, I don't have the band on it because it wasn't necessary, because it was a jar that was on the top. So I didn't have to worry about having that buffer. The reason you want your bands to be washed and dried, if I didn't say that, fully dried, before you even put them loosely onto your jars, is so that they do not rust and then stick to the jar, making it almost impossible, sometimes very impossible, to get that band off of your jar. But again, I'm going to reiterate the fact that yes, it is okay to both put the bands back on, clean and dry, loosely on your canned goods, and to stack them. Now, when it comes to your dried goods like this lid is not loose. It doesn't need to be loose. Do you need to put the bands on your dried goods? No, but I recommend it. If your stuff is vacuum sealed properly, you shouldn't have to have the band on there. I like to put the band on and put it on snugly just in case it loses its seal. The band is going to help hold that lid tight against the jar and help keep things fresh for a longer period of time. Now, tip number 3 is You want to make sure that you do not forget to rotate your goods. Now, I have some carrots here from 2021. These are the carrots that I am working through right now. Working through my oldest carrots, my oldest beans. These are also from 2021, but I have newer ones back there. But I work through the oldest stuff first when it comes to the foods in my pantry. Now, though your canned goods can last for a good many years, probably indefinitely, I would say, as long as all your jars stay sealed, they will continue to lose nutrients over time. So they'll never lose all of their nutrients. They're just going to eventually lose most or all of their vitamin C, vitamin A, thiamine, and riboflavin. You'll still keep most of your other vitamins plus your minerals, fiber, protein, and more. But obviously eating them sooner within the first few years is going to be better. So this is why it's important that you rotate. The same applies to your freeze-dried goods and your dehydrated goods. No matter how they're preserved, they're still going to lose nutrients over time, especially when stored in glass jars where they're going to get some light exposure no matter how dark the area is you keep it in. Well, you got to have light to walk back there and get your stuff out. So they're always going to be exposed to a little bit of light at some point, unless you're keeping them in Mylar. But regardless, it doesn't matter. Rotation is very important that you do that. And so just get yourself in the habit and coming up with your system of, like, when I'm canning carrots, beans, peaches, whatever it is, I have special sections in my pantry where I keep these things. Everything gets pulled out and reorganized so that the oldest stuff is on the top and front of my shelf, so they're the easiest to grab and start working through. And so, but in order to do that, I do have to pull all that stuff out, lay it out, organize it, put everything back with the newest, the freshly canned stuff going in first. So on to number 4. That would be forgetting to check your seals on your jars. It doesn't matter if they're vacuum sealed dry goods or canned goods, pressure canned or water bath canned. I recommend that you always leave your stuff out on your counter for at least 24 hours. Now, everything may have sealed when you got done vacuum sealing it. You knew it was sealed because you checked the jar, like this turkey right here. I'll take this band off. You lifted it up by the lid and the lid did not come off, so you know it had a good seal. That does not mean there might have been a little bit of grit or something under that lid or on the rim of the jar that might have been missed, thus causing the thing to maybe seal initially, but that little bit in there can cause it to lose its seal. Or maybe your lids, because when I vacuum seal, I'm using recycled lids all the time, and eventually the little gummy part inside the lid is going to get old and maybe not seal so well. So always leave that stuff out, because if it's going to lose its seal, it's most likely going to happen within the first 24 hours. But the same goes with your pressure canned goods. Leave them out. You want them to cool down anyway, but double check everything before you put it back in storage. Otherwise, you may find later on that something has come unsealed and thus spoiled. And then the last point, when it comes to canning, make sure you're using proper canning times for what it is that you're canning and the size of the jars. So for pressure canning, there's going to be different times according to the size of the jar, but even according to the vegetables. Now, I made the mistake for the longest time because every vegetable I came across that I was canning seemed to have the same canning times. Pints were 75 minutes and quarts were 90 minutes for low acid foods like green beans. So when I first started canning carrots, instead of looking it up, I used the same canning times for the carrots. Now, thankfully, I erred on the longer time, so it didn't harm anything. I don't have to worry about anything going bad in here. I just went too long, which means I wasted fuel in the process. And so the whole processing time was far longer than it needed to be. So I was canning my pints at 75 minutes like I would with green beans, Or meat is the same way, typically at 75 and 90 minutes. But carrots, it's only 25 minutes for a pint. So I had like 50 minutes worth of canning time that I didn't need to put into that. That's 50 minutes worth of propane that was running for no reason at all. So, but the same goes the other way. You want to make sure that you're canning things long enough. So if you're pressure canning meats, though most meats are going to be 75 and 90, when it comes to fish, I believe, if I remember correctly, it doesn't matter the size of the jar. It can be a half pint, a quart. It's always going to be 110 minutes. Now, some of that can even vary by the type of fish. I don't think so, but you want to always double check that. The only fish I've ever canned has been salmon. So I did the 110 minutes. Again, it was a while ago, so I believe that's the correct time for that. And I was canning quarts. So don't make the mistake I did and just assume that all fruits, all vegetables, all whatever can at the same amount of time. And that includes water bath canning as well. Now, water bath canning low acid foods, so a lot of people will protest against this. It is a long time used method that they even have canning charts out. You can still find them today, the vintage canning charts that show the canning times for both pressure canning and water bath canning low acid foods such as vegetables and meats. But typically those times for low acid is 3 hours all the way across the board, whether it be pint or quart. But just like with the fish, there are a few things that should be boiled for a longer period of time. So you want to make sure you're always checking all of those things, all of your canning times, instead of assuming they're all going to be the same, because you don't want to underdo something, but you also don't want to waste your fuel, whether it be electricity, propane, or whatever. Now, I did throw in one more point because I was trying to decide which of the last two I was going to do, and I figure I'll just go ahead and throw this in as a bonus point, and that is, don't make the mistake of not properly securing your stored foods against damage. So if it's dried goods and you have it stored in Mylar bags and you may have a pest problem like rats or mice, you want to make sure that you're storing those things as something that rats and mice cannot chew through, because they can quite easily chew through Mylar. When you're talking about your jars, you want to look at taking extra measures to help prevent your jars from damage, whether it be just you being a klutz like me and accidentally pushing a jar from one side of a shelf off the other side of the shelf of your canned peaches and shattering the jar and making a massive mess. And yes, this did happen to me. And since then, Patrick has made some wooden slats that I can hook into my shelves. And I have a video on that. If you'd like to check that out, I'll put in the description box down below. So that won't happen again. But that will also make them a little more safe against earthquakes and other such. And other things to look into is padding. People have all different great ideas for padding your jars, whether it be using old socks and pull them over. Some people like to knit or crochet covers. That could take a long time if you're like me and you have a ton of jarred goods, both dried and canned, put up, or pieces of cardboard, whatever. Just consider finding ways to help protecting all this hard work and money you've put into putting up this food against damage of any kind that can happen. Those are the points that I wanted to cover. If you have any thoughts, ideas you'd like to share, please put them in comments down below. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.